an interesting element for sure, especially also one of the things that we've been discussing quite a lot in our transformational catalyst group is the Three Horizons framework, and especially what I've been really passionate about in that has been the notion of the pockets of the future in the present. And of
Yeah.
course, that is a different way of saying trends, I suppose. But at least to some extent, if you recognize that the future has to begin somewhere, it begins as something small sometimes and not necessarily as something big. I've
In,
been,
in, in the theory of foresight and future studies, this pocket of the future are what we call the weak signals. So they are
Mm,
very nascent, very emerging signals that point at a shift, a change of mindset, a technological breakthrough, and so on and so forth.
yeah,
Usually, when you show these weak signals to your client, it looks like small, and your clients might be like, yeah, this will, but they don't have the funding, but it's only in this country, but, and you're like, yeah, but imagine in 5 years' time the scale it could have. So you're perfectly right. One of the tenets of the theory of the futures is that the future is already there, it's just not evenly distributed. And this might mean it's not evenly distributed across countries, across demographic groups, or across sectors of the economy.
mm,
So in the future practice, sometimes you look at what's happening in other sectors that you know are more forward thinking, and you try to imagine what would happen if this evolution would happen in health or healthcare, for instance,
yeah,
part of the game.
yeah. Recently, for instance, I've been quite engaged and related to AMR, for instance, in using data capture technology from the fishing industry for a better capturing of data for human use. And of course, the fishing industry did it to make more fish, but in this case, it might be used for a completely different purpose, but still to make us more aware of our microbiological world. Yeah. So great that we managed to find a window of opportunity in the Wi-Fi as well. Um, I know that Dimitri, that we will likely be able to talk about more about AMR. Um, and if that is one thing that we have been discussing normally as well, is the evolution towards One Health and how to solve the antimicrobial resistance problem. Um, I think maybe actually you managed to not mention that particular problem. Is that by any chance also something that you've spotted weak signals about?
For me,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a huge unspoken public health issue that is looming on the horizon. There are weak signals in the way the pharma industry is trying to partner with governments to finance the R&D for new antibiotics. There are weak signals on where we could source potentially antibiotics. There are some very, very interesting conversation about looking into caves or underground to find new forms of bacteria that could be helpful. It's not very widely spoken about in the media or even in the public opinion. It's definitely not front of mind. But there are some people in the world that are very, very worried about that, and I would say rightfully so. I think when people talk about the future, it's always a future in which we assume penicillin still works. Yeah, but if it doesn't in 30 years' time, we are so cooked.
Mm.
So it's definitely a topic of concern, and there are some weak signals related to it. I think there's also a question about international collaboration into this. There are schemes that can be put in place to refrain from using a specific antibiotics for 10, 20 years for the time to the bacteria to forget about these ones. But it would involve that all countries in the world play the same game and are applying the same rotation of antibiotics, and right now this has been a roadblocker as well. So it's very, very complex and interesting topics. It's a mix of science, it's a mix of economical incentives and business model for antibiotics. It's a mix of international collaboration. There's a whole patient-doctor dynamic also to unpack. Very often patients expect an antibiotics and they would think they have a rubbish doctor if they are not prescribed an antibiotic. So yeah, it's a very, very important topic. The thing is, it's an interesting topic because we don't want to improve, we want to keep the status quo. The status quo is that antibiotics right now are working. We want to keep it that way. Very often, people think in terms of growth or new stuff or disruption. No, here the bar is pretty low. We just want to keep it working. So that's why it doesn't keep people exciting, actually.
Mm, yeah, probably as well.
I don't know, Dmitry, what's your take on this?
Um, Actually, your last words resonate with my position. This is the way I think the world should look at in the first place. Those antibiotic classes that we already have, it should be enough to keep us safe for many, many years ahead. The problem is, and well, again, this is my personal viewpoint, that the problem lies is not developing new antibiotics, new drugs, new classes, but in maintaining proper behavior both from the doctors, prescribing doctors, and from the public. It's in the culture, it's in the traditions, it's in, as you said, it's in also in norms and regulations. If in a country I can go to pharmacy and talk a doctor or pharmacist into prescribing me a doctor because, yeah, I have a prescription, but I forgot it at home, or my kid is sick. So, wouldn't you give a drug for a kid who is, I don't know, 5 years old and sitting at home with a fever? Well, of course you will. So, yeah, I think the problem is mainly in the area of our culture and behaviors than in innovations and new drugs or new technologies, bacteriophages or whatever, because eventually the humanity will develop resistance to any new drug, whatever it is. Yep.
If we overuse it like we've been doing in the past.
Absolutely.
I think it's more of a sensible use of the antibiotics we have right now, and a sensible use of it could already help prevent the development of resistance. There was a very funny and interesting study that was done about 5 years ago in virtual reality. So doctors were put in a virtual reality environment with patients that would pressure them, virtual patients in a virtual reality environment, of course, fake patients, people that didn't even exist, avatar, that would try to pressure them to get an antibiotic prescribed. And there was a standard script of what the patient would say, and the study wanted to understand at which point, if ever, the doctor was going to cave in, and to understand the demographic profile of the doctors that would cave in. Is it a more senior doctor? Is it the youngest doctors? And so on and so forth. And the results were amazing because actually a majority of doctors would cave in to an avatar, to the fake pressure in a fake virtual reality environment of a fake person that doesn't even exist. So you can imagine in real life how many doctors would prescribe an antibiotics under the pressure of a patient. And I think it's really a topic to cover. It's driving better awareness amongst patients that, as we put in French, antibiotics are not automatic. and better educating doctors on how to resist the pressure of a patient asking for antibiotics. There's a really important cultural element to it.
Mm.
And we're not talking about 5 doctors, we're talking about all doctors worldwide. We're talking about a huge, huge, huge population of people to engage into this change.
We had on a similar sort of talking about national strategy for antibiotic stewardship, we had the conversation also about how doctors would really hope that patients would be better equipped in not asking for antibiotics and not expecting antibiotics and not continuously asking for it. So the conversation led to that we needed better diagnostics that would lead the accurate amount of people to get antibiotics when they needed it. But we then did a live, an audio analysis of real patient-doctor conversations, and sort of to back completely your analysis, when faced with real people, it was actually not the patients that introduced the topic of antibiotics at all. It was often the doctor, which led to the idea that if we wait till the patient is in the waiting room with any kind of fever or any kind of disease, we've already lost the battle. So getting putting our focus on better diagnostics was obviously not per se wrong, but it would never really amount to anything, because what we really needed to do was to raise the antibiotic literacy of the people, and also, of course, reduce the disease burden in the first place.
I think another interesting point you're mentioning is the role of the doctor, and I'm not an expert in medical curriculum around the world, but I'm not quite sure in their studies how long is a lecture about antibiotic resistance and their level of education and awareness on the different class of antibiotics that may be a problem.
It might be long enough, but I think maybe though that it's trying to ask in trying to get the doctors to solve this issue is no different to ask an individual fisherman in keeping back the entire ocean at bay, and it's there's a sort of a total imbalance in the power that that individual has in affecting the entire behavior of the community that surrounds him or her.
I do agree to some extent. It's a very interesting example of where every individual behavior adds up
Yeah,
to create a risk. It's a little bit the reverse of herd immunity with vaccines.
Mm.
You know, you need to reach a critical threshold of people being vaccinated to get the snowball effect on the herd immunity system working. You cannot put on one individual the responsibility for achieving herd immunity, but it's all individuals together that help driving it.
True,
So I
true.
think it's a kind of a similar thing. It's not about one individual, it's about everyone being part of it and everyone being concerned and everyone being part of the solution. Now, on to your point about patient education, which I think is also a very big element of it. We all know right now people ask ChatGPT before asking their doctors. So maybe it would also be interesting to understand what LLMs, what ChatGPT say to patients about antibiotics.
Mm.
Because if I can tell you, if you Google your symptoms and ChatGPT said, oh, you should take amoxicillin, and of course you're going to pressure your doctor to get amoxicillin. So it will be very, very interesting to see how the new sources of information for patients are shaping or encouraging expectations that maybe we may not want them to have. Or on the contrary, it could be an element of solution. But I think a big part of the question is how do we influence patients? And right now, LLMs, ChatGPT, are a big part of the answer to this question.
It's a very interesting point you make, Agatha. I mean, the fact is, what we do know about these AI models is that, in fact, they reinforce old thinking. Because where do they learn from otherwise? Whereas what we're trying to do is to change thinking in terms of education, health literacy. You know, is what you read. The big thing about health literacy is who takes responsibility for health literacy. I mean, as I may have mentioned, I chair an international group dealing with this very area of health literacy and patient empowerment. And the fact is, education is a crucial thing both for doctors and for healthcare professionals and for patients, but no one's actually taking responsibility for this. You talked about whether there were lectures in the curriculum on AMR or whatever, but it's actually where there are about helping society understand health better. It's part of a prevention scheme as well as making better doctor-patient relationships, but it's not happening. And ChatGPT isn't going to change that, that's for sure. So we have, what point I'm making is we have to stand further back. I mean, you will understand that as a futurist. You know, we're talking about systems here. And this is why, as I say, our organization really focuses on systems, because if you simply, you know, it's a point about fixing things, even in this, you know, really important sector about how we treat infectious diseases. If we focus solely on that, we miss the point about what are the main levers for change. We aren't actually about fixing this particular thing. It's really stepping back, helicoptering up, as it were, to look at what the real influences are. Take in America, for example, what influences these kinds of behaviors in the States? And the short answer is insurance companies. You know, it's got nothing to do with health or whatever. It's about money. You know, so it's very complex. These are very complex issues.
To some extent, I do agree with you. I think in America, there might also be a question about the education system that doesn't necessarily encourage individual and original thinking from students, because it's always having the right answer and not necessarily asking the right questions. So it's even more systematic than it, if you want. It's about education systems that encourage students to do some research by themselves, to be very critical about the answers they're getting, and to be very critical about the questions that they're asking.
As a half question and out of curiosity to get your feedback, Dimitri, you will probably, of course, remember that the Finns a couple of years ago had the idea of donating education on AI for 1 million Europeans. And that led someone in Sweden to have the ambition of wanting to educate 1 million Swedes on becoming antibiotic smart, thinking that one of the elements that we did gain during the pandemic was the willingness to meet digitally and train digitally. So there was nothing that was technically standing in the way of getting a mass boost in antibiotic awareness in the population by educating 1 million Swedes. And by extension, you can then say, why not have countries compete on reaching 1 million antibiotic aware citizens as soon as possible? What's your take on that kind of, I mean, patients, yes, but citizens for sure. How does that play into that sort of system change idea? Either one.
Are you asking?
Yes.
So I must admit I never heard about this initiative about educating 1 million Swedes. If I remember right, the population of Sweden is like around 10 million. So which means every 10th.
Yeah.
But was there anything about the content? What kind of training would be, or what kind of education would it be?
The Swedish REACT, working with the Research Institutes of Sweden, RISE, and others, this was part of a system where they were talking about what would it mean to be an antibiotic smart municipality? What would it mean to be an antibiotic smart organization? What would it mean to be? And within that sort of mindset, it's not just, they said, for the institutions or the individual professionals to be smart about this, but also for the citizens. So what I guess in principle they could have said their goal to be 100%, but they chose more or less 10% in wanting to reach 1 million Swedes. But again, from a few years ago, that would have been completely impossible, because how could you ever reach 1 million people by digital training? But I know that it's not necessarily something you do by day to day, but it's possible.
I think this kind of initiative has, again, my personal opinion, little sense. It would be more like a waste of money, because people, at one moment you can teach 1 million Swedes or people, let's say, or they become antibiotic smart, people die, new people come to the arena. So there is always a turnover of the population, and at some moment it will be washed away. Second, I think this kind of education would be more sensible if it's targeted to those sectors or those people who really impact the consumption, antibiotic consumption. And I'm not talking just about our health sector, but also agriculture, because most of antibiotics are consumed in the farming sector. Not
we don't talk enough about antibiotics and animal health. It's a huge topic.
Yeah. So I would rather target this kind of education campaigns, or I don't know, courses in those areas like agriculture, environmental health. Yeah. Well, of course, public health. But again, I don't really know the system of antibiotic or prescription and dispersion in Sweden, but I think it is impossible to come to a pharmacy and even talk a pharmacist into selling you an antibiotic. This is impossible. At least in Finland, it is not. Which means pharmacists are out of this training.
To be fair, you're right. In Europe, I travel extensively in Europe, and it happens I go to the pharmacy to see what I can get away with. In most of the countries in Europe, it's impossible to get antibiotics at a pharmacy without a prescription. Now, go to India, go to China, and you can get whatever you want.
I know.
So it's also, when I talk about international collaboration, bacteria travel. And even if in Europe we have laws to try to structure the delivery of antibiotics, we need everyone to play the game. And it's a question of what also is happening in other countries. Now, to your point, in Sweden, in Spain, in Finland, in the UK, in France, impossible to get an antibiotic without prescription at a pharmacy. I fully agree with you.
As an alternative, maybe, because to me, because I know from my practice, if I go to a doctor, like primary healthcare doctor, I know what I need to say if I really need I really want an antibiotic. I know what kind of symptoms, what duration of the symptoms should be mentioned. So I know that it will end up in prescribing me an antibiotic. But to me, again, this is my personal experience. an eye opener was when a couple of years ago I had an antibiotic susceptibility panel run on me, and I found out how many antibiotics I am resistant to. And this put me in this shock state.
Yeah.
Because when I was a kid, back in the Soviet times, my mom would give me, yeah, you have a fever. There is tetracycline. Please take it.
Yeah, culturally speaking, Russians are quick on the trigger for antibiotics. I've also been in touch with the Russian healthcare system, so it's something I've noticed. And possibly in Russia, if you go and ask good enough, you're going to get antibiotics without a prescription. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Still, it is like this still.
I'm probably being guilty of something like that in Russia. Maybe not antibiotics, but fluconazole or something.
Otherwise, it makes no sense to go to a doctor if you
can use a pharmacist.
if you leave doctor's office without a prescription, what the hell? That was a waste of time.
Are you really alive if you didn't go away with a prescription? Yes. The point, though, you quite rightly mentioned, Dimitri, is that to target, but in order to target, you also need data that would suggest where that target might be, either geographically or in the type of professionals. I mean, if we try to raise awareness among the already converted, it won't probably matter much. So, yes, of course.
I just would like to add, because apparently there's an initiative that happened in France when I was a kid, and it was not in other countries. And it's about, there was no targeting. It was TV advertising sponsored by the Ministry of Health talking about antibiotic resistance. And it was essentially an advertising, someone being sick, talking to their friend, be like, oh, I'm sick. And the friend would like, have you been to the doctor? Yeah, I've been, but yeah. And the friend would be like, has the doctor prescribed antibiotics? And the friend would like, and the person would be like, no, he hasn't. And the friend would like, this doctor sucks. And the tagline was, antibiotic, it's not automatic. So now if you go to France, maybe it was about 15, 20 years ago. It was when I was still watching TV in France, so a while back. There's a whole generation of French people that think and say antibiotic, it's not automatic. It's very simple, it's very catchy. And it provides cover to the doctor, because then when you go to the doctor and you ask for an antibiotic, the doctor is like, antibiotic, it's not automatic. And it was a public health awareness campaign that I think worked for people in my generation, worked really well. And it was TV back in the day, whereas when TV was a key medium for advertising, I grant you that. But I think it's not totally impossible to do this type of public awareness campaigns in a very large scale without any targeting, just mass bombing everyone with a simple messaging that the use of antibiotic is not automatic.
Well, it's certainly establishing a joint language as well.
Exactly.
A joint reference. Which only raises the other issue of the current lack of energy or funding in many countries to do that kind of mass sort of information, but which leads to another of your if you will, hobby horses, Dimitri, and pardon for the expression, but pandemic preparedness, and our maybe also current lack of implementing true pandemic preparedness plans that would truly, I mean, be a logical thing to do, considering that pandemics will happen. And it seems like as long as we are still speeding along on the highway, we think that we never really need to investigate how to invent brakes, because so far so good.
It's interesting, Lars, that of course there's an exact parallel with climate change too. there's a lot of people now saying, hold on a minute, we're spending all that time talking about how we try and prevent a rise in temperature when we should be preparing for the rise in temperature that's going to happen whether we like it or not. And they're just not putting the resources in there.
Yeah. Which is another linked challenge to our mindset when it comes to futures. And in this case, of course, be that rising temperatures or sea change, sea level rise, or things that we kind of can pretty well map how we'll progress given our climate models, and yet failing to prepare for that is, as they say, preparing to fail. Is that, I mean, sometimes I don't know the English expression, but in Danish we have the expression that a child that have been burnt really smells bad, and it's of course, and with the thinking behind the expression is that that if you've actually if you've touched the fire, you will learn how to avoid it. But sometimes also people have to actually touch the fire in order to learn anything, it seems. And that's, of course, coming back to the good old, why are we still not preventing as much as we could? Yeah. This was a fascinating discussion. Any last remarks from each of you? And I think otherwise, though, this will make a wonderful addition to our online segment on debates among EHFF members.
I was just wondering to hear a little bit more about the EHFF. How can we contribute? Do you want to organize webinars or podcasts? I mean, it was a great conversation about AMR. If there's an interest, we could have a white paper about the future of AMR, and we pick from the association whoever wants to contribute. It seems, Dimitri, you have a huge expertise. So how does it work?
Well, there are there's a number of different avenues, if you will, from here. Very specifically on AMR, we do have an AMR working group that you are very. It would be wonderful if you want to participate in that group. That goes for you too, Dimitri, but I think I've already mentioned that. And in that group, we try to identify various areas where we think that we can somehow make a difference. Currently, what we've been focusing on would be providing some kind of better heat map, using better data gathering that would allow us at least to have an idea about where we're fighting what problem. The other one would be how to use creative messaging, especially either using outdoor space or unused screensavers in hospitals for messaging because it's simply there. And the last one is an idea of how to advance gamification by combining game developers in Africa with educational institutions in Europe so that we use a gamification approach on raising antibiotic awareness. The last one is also connected to the fact that currently, after the UK left the Union, there isn't actually any institution across Europe that works with gamification in educational settings. They used to be in Public Health England, but nowadays there isn't any. So even though, as you say, there are definitely a lot of institutions that are working with AMR, the element about how can we possibly work with different educational formats to raise awareness in the population, that's not simply being done. So
can I also add in, just because we're short of time, Agatha, as a futurist, a trained futurist, I think the Transformational Catalyst group that we're running should be of particular interest to you, as that's very much focused on future thinking and systems.
Yeah. But within different working groups, we, the members, try to see how can we identify gaps, opportunities where a membership forum like ours can make a difference.
Can I ask, where can we find the list of the working groups? Is it on the website? How do we identify the working groups we'd like to be part of as a group?
The working groups currently it is not updated as it should be, but I will send you the list for sure as
Perfect.
well. No problem.
And one thought that crossed my mind, especially for you, Lars, as you said, you were interested in some frameworks that are being used in Foresight. Since this forum is about European Health Futures Forum, if there's an interest for me to do some webinars for any member of the forum about future thinking, about the type of tools that we use, about the Three Horizon framework, about what is a trend, about weak signal, about the framework
Absolutely.
that we use,
Yeah.
we could think of either one webinar, Introduction to Foresight, either a series of webinar where we can tie it up with more topics,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
not necessarily related to health per se, but just to for people to understand that there is a discipline called Foresight to provide a structured manner to think
Yeah.
about the future, and maybe that could be useful for all the members.
Absolutely. Also, we are doing today actually one about storytelling in relation to clarifying futures as well. But let's talk more, an entire series. And I think also Daniel, that leads the Transformational Catalyst group, would be very engaged in wanting to have an entire series on that as well.
We can start with an introduction webinar and see if there's more interest, appetite. But if it's my way to contribute to the forum, I'll be happy to.
That sounds
Or
good.
it can be on some specific topics like AMR. For me, it's super interesting to hear from experts in the field, and I'd be happy to be part of those conversations as well.
Yeah. Well, both, all. Yeah, that would be wonderful. I will introduce you also to the element that we have, which we call the domain experts, where some try to really engage and try to contribute on specific areas. And that would be one that you might be interested in exploring as well.
That would be great.
And thank you for the reminder of updating the website with the actual groups.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. I'll get back to you with some recordings and once I've edited as soon as possible, and then have a wonderful continued Wednesday.
Very nice meeting you all. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
One comment, one quick one. So because I know that last year will be in Helsinki in November for this European Public Health conference, but if for more from the network, from your network coming, so I will be happy to engage in person, not only through the screen.
That's wonderful for sure. Which is, as a very brief, the better you can inform the rest of us, Agatha, about where you are at one point, the better we can meet you in person as well. So if you're going to some interesting places, let us know.
Well, I'm thinking the next one will be the Radical Health Festival in Helsinki. I'm not sure if any of you are in touch with Pascal Lardier or the organizing committee.
I am definitely trying at this point to organize, I think, 5 different sessions with Pascal. So hoping that one of the 5, or at least, and maybe not all of the 5, but at least one of the 5 will make it to the program.
Okay.
Pascal Lardier is a member of EHFF, as it happens.
Yeah, also.
Sorry, who?
Pascal Lardier is a member long-term of
Yeah.
EHFF.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm also in conversation with Pascal to bring a session to the Radical Health Festival. I've been participating over the last 2-3 years. I think in every edition at one point I had a session. So it would be very nice to get a chance to meet there. Maybe we could have a small informal EHFF gathering either before, either after, to get a chance to meet face to face.
That would be wonderful too. Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah. All roads lead to Helsinki at this point. Yeah.
Yes. Otherwise, I'll be in November in Berlin for the Frontiers Health Conference.
Yeah.
And I'll be in Dubai for the Dubai Future Forum also in November. So
well, Yeah, do share. I'll try to share them via both our newsletter and our LinkedIn profile.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to
Thank you.
meet you, Gareth. Yeah.
Bye.
Cheers.